What an amazing day filled with incredible ideas. So, where do these ideas come from? This is a question that I have been pondering for the last 35 years. Where do ideas come from? I started out as a neurophysiologist, poking little tiny cells with even tinier electrodes, seeing what they would tell me about creativity and innovation. After I finished my PhD, I went out to study and sort of learn all about creativity in the wild, working in big companies and small companies, even starting my own. And for the last almost 13 years, I've been at Stanford, teaching classes on creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship. And in my classes, I've done endless experiments with my students, trying to figure out what is involved with unlocking creativity. What I've realized over the last few years is that we look at creativity in much too narrow a way. We really need to open the aperture and look at creativity in a very different light. And what I've done is put together a model that I'm going to basically explain to you in the next few minutes about all the things we need to unlock creativity. And I want to point out, before I take it apart, that this innovation engine, that's what I call it, has two parts. The inside is you, your knowledge, your imagination, your attitude. And the outside is the outside world, the resources, the habitat, and the culture. So let's start. Let's start where most people start. Most people start thinking about creativity by thinking about imagination. So let's start there. Now, imagination, one of the sad things is that we don't really teach people how to increase their imagination in school. And so there really are ways to increase our ability to come up with really interesting ideas. We have to go back to kindergarten to see where the problem is. If you're in kindergarten, it's very likely you'll get a question like this. What is the sum of 5 plus 5? So what's the answer to this? 10. You guys are really smart, right? Okay, we know it's 10 because there's one right answer to this problem. But what if we ask this question in a slightly different way? What if we ask, what two numbers add up to 10? How many answers are this to this? Infinite. Infinite number. And this is critically important and something that many of the speakers have brought up today, is that the way you ask the question determines the type of answers you get. The question you ask is the frame into which the answers will fall. And if you don't ask the question in a thoughtful way, you're not going to get really interesting answers. Consider the fact that the Copernican revolution came about by reframing the question, what if the Earth is not the center of the solar system? What if the sun is? And that opened up the entire study of astronomy. But you know what? You don't have to do this in such a serious way. You can practice it every single day with jokes. Because most jokes that we tell are interesting because the frame switches in the middle of the joke. Consider this, the Pink Panther, if you've seen this movie, he walks into a hotel, there's a little dog sitting on the carpet, he says to the hotel manager, does your dog bite? And the manager says, no, my dog doesn't bite. He reaches down, the dog basically attacks him. He says, what happened? He says, well, that's not my dog. Think about it. Whenever you hear a joke, you will find that almost always it's that the frame is switched in the middle. And it's a really fun way to practice framing and reframing problems. So that's one of the ways that you can increase your imagination. But there are other ways. One of the key ways is to connect and combine ideas. Most inventions in the world, most innovations come from putting things together that haven't been there together before, often in really unusual and surprising ways. One of my favorite ways to practice this is with the Japanese art of shindogu. Shindogu is the art of creating useless inventions. They're not useful, they're not useless, they're unuseless. And what they really are is a way of saying, there might be something here, but I'm not quite sure. So in this example with the umbrellas on the shoes, well, gee, it might not be very practical, but it unlocks some really, really interesting ideas. Speaking of shoes, here's another shindogu. Okay, little dustpans. Again, it might not be practical, but you know what? There's an interesting idea there. Again, you can use jokes for inspiration every single day. One of my favorite things, whenever I get the New Yorker, and I'm sure anyone who reads the New Yorker knows, the first thing you do is you open up the back cover and you look at the cartoon caption contest. The cartoon caption contest always puts things together that are not obvious, often things that are out of scale, or things that would be very, very surprising to have in the same frame. And your job is to come up with a really creative way to connect these things in really interesting and surprising ways. So here's the caption for this cartoon. It is, we'll start you out here, then give you more responsibilities as you gain experience. Now, of course, you could come up with an endless number of other solutions. So those are two ways for you to increase your imagination, but there's another that I want to bring up today, and that is challenging assumptions. One of the biggest problems we have is that when we ask people questions and give them problems, they come up with the first right answer. And so we end up getting really incremental solutions. So what we do in our creativity class is we give problems that are really surprising, where there is not one right answer. So here's an example of one I just gave recently. This is the exact design brief. I gave this actually to a group of students at Osaka University. And their challenge was to create as much value as possible, value measured in any way they wanted, starting with the contents of one trash can. They had 2 hours to do it. How'd you like that to do that? One of the interesting things about this assignment, and I put a lot of thought into framing the problem beforehand, is that trash is actually has negative value, right? We actually pay people to take it away. So what happened is these students ended up spending quite a bit of time in advance of diving into the project thinking about what value meant for them. They thought about friendship and community and health and financial security, all sorts of things that ended up informing the way they thought about the trash cans that they were going to use to create some value. To raise the bar even further, I gave them a little bit more of a challenge. I told them that I had sent a note out, which I did, to my colleagues around the world, and invited their students to participate at the same time. So there were students in Europe, in Asia, in the US, and in Latin America, all doing the same project at the same time. So let me show you a couple of the things that resulted from this. A group in Ecuador started out with a garbage can filled with yard waste. Yard waste. I probably wouldn't have picked that trash can, but look what an amazing thing they did. They turned it into a beautiful mural. Or a girl in Ireland, her mom had just gone through her brother's sock drawer and had a whole trash can of old holy socks. You know what she did? They were all different colors, black, white, gray. She cut them up, sewed them together, and made this sweater. Pretty cool. I hope some of you will go through your sock drawers later today. So these are 3 things you can do to increase your imagination, right? Framing and reframing problems, connecting, combining ideas, and challenging assumptions. But unfortunately, this is not enough. You need to look at the other pieces of the innovation engine. And one of the next pieces on the inside is your knowledge. Your knowledge is the toolbox for your imagination. Today we've heard all about medical breakthroughs and about autonomous vehicles. And why? How could they make this? These folks needed a depth of knowledge about medicine or about engineering to bring these ideas to life. Now, of course, you can learn things by going to school, by reading books. But one of the most powerful ways to learn things and to gain knowledge is by paying attention. Most of us do not pay attention to the world around us. Not only do we miss opportunities to see problems we can solve, but we also miss the solutions that might be in front of us. And one of my favorite ways to teach students this is to send them out into locations they've been to many times before and get them to look at them with fresh eyes. But I'm not the only one who does this. I want to tell you a quick story about a friend of mine, Bob Seelig, who's a professor here at Stanford, who taught a Stanford sophomore seminar for 2 weeks, and it was called the Stanford Safari. And the students basically over 2 weeks acted as if they were naturalists, as if they were just like Darwin and the Galapagos, but they were on the Stanford campus. And they talked to everyone they could to give a different point of view and perspective about Stanford, from the groundskeepers and the pest controller to the librarians and the organists and all the living Stanford presidents. They walked away not just with a deep understanding of Stanford, but an incredible appreciation for how important it is to pay attention. But imagination and knowledge are not enough. Every person needs to have the attitude, the mindset, the motivation, the drive to solve the problems they're going to solve. If you don't have that drive and that motivation, you're not going to connect and combine ideas. You're not going to reframe problems. You're not going to challenge assumptions and go beyond the first right answer. Most people, unfortunately, view themselves as puzzle builders. They basically see themselves as having a very defined task And their job is to get all the pieces and put them together to reach that goal. But what happens? If you're a puzzle builder and you're missing one or two pieces, what happens? You can't reach your goal. True innovators, true entrepreneurs actually see themselves as quilt makers. They basically take all the resources they have around them. They leverage at things, even the garbage can, right? They leverage the materials they have that are available to them and create something that is surprising and really fascinating. This is incredibly important. We have to view ourselves as those who can leverage the resources we have around us to really make amazing things happen. So this is our internal combustion engine for creativity. Our knowledge is a toolbox for our creativity. Our imagination is the catalyst for the transformation of that knowledge into new ideas. And our attitude is the spark that gets this going. The wonderful thing, though, is this Mobius strip of the innovation engine is so powerful that you can start anywhere. If you're the manager of an organization, you can think about the culture and set the culture. You can build habitats that stimulate the imagination. If you're an individual, you can start by building your base of knowledge. You can start with a passion and attitude that you're going to solve a problem. You can start anywhere to get this innovation going. The most important thing is that everyone has the key to their innovation engine. It's up to them to turn it. Thank you.